Hi everyone, welcome to Understanding Politics. This is the first of my 3-minute theory videos where I try to provide the shortest possible explanation of an important political or international relations theory. Today I'm going to talk about the history of probably the most well-known mainstream international relations theory, which is realism. I'll try and give developed examples and some strengths and weaknesses in another video, but this will just be a quick historical overview. So I'll try and do this in as close to 3 minutes as I can. Okay, so realism, with variants such as NeoRealism or structural realism, focuses on how states gain and exercise power in the international system. The key ideas are states and power. States as the referent object of the theory and power as the motivator and vehicle for behaviour. States are generally considered unitary actors, which means that their internal politics doesn't really matter all that much in the international system. This is called the billiard ball model because states are just differently coloured, identically shaped balls bouncing around the international system. Realism can be traced back to ancient Greece and the writer Thucydides, whose History of the Peloponnesian War contains a passage known as the Melian Dialogue. Without going into all the details, the idea communicated in this dialogue is summed up by the famous quote, "The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must." Ancient Greek is notoriously difficult to translate and interpret, but this has historically been taken to describe a sort of amoral might makes right worldview. We can pick the thread back up around 2000 years later with Machiavelli, who identified the idea of raison d'etat, or reasons of state, or in modern terms, the national interest. This was the idea that different states have different national interests which drive their international behaviour. This ran against centuries of Catholic teaching where war was seen in universalising spiritual terms. Realism's pessimistic opinion of states as being power seekers who advance their own interests rests on an even more pessimistic belief which conceives of individuals as being similarly selfish. People like Thomas Hobbes described how in a society with no governing authority, also known as the state of nature or anarchy, people would be in constant conflict due to their desire for power and self-preservation. For realist IR theorists, the international system is just such a state of anarchy, in which no one can enforce laws, and so conflict is a constant possibility. All cooperation is temporary, and the desire for power and position underlies everything. This position is particularly understandable in the time between the decline of papal authority and the rise of the United Nations. So, classical realism rests on three things: human nature, the nature of states, and the structure of the international system. People want power, states want power, and there's no one to stop them playing dirty to get it. Moreover, this behaviour isn't necessarily irrational or bad, in fact it is inevitable and rational. The Cold War was something of a challenge for realists as it was a time relatively free of direct great power confrontation. I mean, it wasn't really, just ask people in Vietnam, but that's how the story goes. However, neo-realists developed the idea of bipolarity and balance of power to explain the Cold War. Basically, the joint powers of the US and Russia cancelled each other out. So, although the international system is anarchic, there were certain structural distributions of power that might make the world more or less violent. This sort of balance of power structure wasn't the only possible configuration though. One possibility is called the Thucydides trap, after our Peloponnesian War guy from earlier, in which the rising power of Athens, or China, meets the declining power of Sparta, or America, and this leads to war. Anyway, this move away from human nature and towards a focus on different structural distributions of power is known as neoliberalism or structural realism, and this brings us almost up to the modern day. Okay, so thanks for listening, and next time I will give an applied example of realism in action.